Hello everyone and welcome to the program. I'm Don Arleth and you're right on time for Flash News, so let's get started. An agreement on the transformation of the mining industry in Poland was signed today. The document defines the principles and pace of the gradual liquidation of the coal mining industry, as well as the mechanisms supporting the transformation of Silesia. The agreement has been accepted by all unions which participated in the negotiations.
In just over 28 years, all of Poland's energy coal mines will be closed. So it was agreed in a social agreement signed today between government representatives and all mining unions in our country. The conditions that policy creates, this framework that the EU climate policy creates, the Green Deal policy, leaves us no other choice but to move in such a direction as to look for other sources of energy generation, other than hard coal or lignite. The document contains provisions on state aid for mines, including among others subsidies to reduce production capacity, financing of liquidation measures and social protection for miners, pre-retirement leaves and one-off severance pay. The agreement also provides for the establishment of a special Silesian transformation fund with an initial capital of 500 million Polish zloty and guarantees for another billion or 16 billion zlotys for investments in clean coal technologies. We highly appreciate the quality of this agreement, especially in the context of labor guarantees and social security. I think that it also gives conditions for what is ahead of us. The entry into force of the social agreement now depends on the European Commission, which must accept the agreement. We will argue that all these support instruments that involve the possibility of granting state aid should be approved and financed from the state budget until 2049, as we have written in this agreement. Experts have no doubts that the agreement between the government and the miners is an opportunity for a responsible and safe energy transition.
Students are returning to stationary learning. Restaurants and bars are open but under sanitary safety measures, and the same applies to cinemas and theaters. People can once again exercise at the gym and swim in swimming pools. Starting today, another stage of loosening restrictions due to the COVID-19 pandemic has been introduced.
After more than 7 months of break, as of today, people can exercise at gyms and fitness clubs again. The government's decision is to open them while maintaining the sanitary regime. In this type of facilities, there is a limit, 1 person per 15 square meters. Solariums and swimming pools are also available. We are enjoying it. We swim, we use the pools. It is very good for our health. There is a limit on this too, half occupancy of the facility. The food service industry could also not wait for the easing of restrictions. We could have invited people here to sit at our tables and have coffee in peace. The outdoor restaurant gardens opened 2 weeks ago. Now customers can go inside. For safety purposes, the half occupancy rule applies. Guests came back to us. They make reservations, call us and ask about available dates. As of today, special events can also be held with a maximum of 50 people. This does not include those already fully vaccinated. Cinemas and theaters resume their activities, but even here there is the sanitary regime. We are talking about occupancy at most half of available seats. The pandemic situation is clearly stabilizing. Less than 950 cases of coronavirus infections have been reported in the past 24 hours.
Experts at the European Medicines Agency have concluded that the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine is safe and effective from the age of 12. Up until now, the vaccine had been approved for people 16 years of age or older.
Pfizer's vaccine for teens 12 and older are already in use in the US.
And now we have data that would show that the vaccine is safe also in the age 12 to 15 years, and that has allowed the scientific committee indeed to conclude today.
As with adult vaccination with 2 doses with at least a 3-week interval is recommended, the efficacy of the vaccine was tested in a group of 2,000 adolescents. Their immune response was better than in the older group. Meanwhile, Oxford University said it wants to bring together experts from around the world, from immunology and public health to computer science and social sciences, to apply lessons from the COVID-19 pandemic to combat future epidemics.
I think the imperative to get ourselves better organized for a whole range of potential pandemics is now going to be apparent to everybody, and they're going to need people to do that.
Abigail, 22, has become the first millionaire in a vaccination lottery organized by the state of Ohio to promote vaccination.
Like you said, I'm definitely not quitting my job. I love it at GE. I love the people I work with. And as for future plans, I'm probably going to invest most of it.
Lotteries and other forms of incentives to get people vaccinated are being introduced by various U.S. states as the number of residents, especially young ones who declare their willingness to take the product, declines.
It's been 40 years since the death of Cardinal Stefan Wyszynski, considered one of the greatest Poles of the 20th century. the primate of the millennium and co-creator of the social changes that led to the fall of communism in Poland. He will soon be proclaimed blessed by the Catholic Church.
At the House of Archbishops of Warsaw on Miodowa Street, the place where Cardinal Stefan Wyszyński died 40 years ago. He died at 4:40 in the morning, the day of the Ascension of the Lord. It was a dramatic time for the Poles because they were losing a man who had been a rock for them for several decades. The funeral ceremony was a great manifestation of the Polish society's attachment to the primate of the millennium. It was something extraordinary. It was such a communal experience which showed how important primate Wyszyński was for hundreds of thousands of Poles gathered in Warsaw at that time. On his coffin was a white and red sash with the inscription, "The Uncrowned King of Poland," and this is how the Poles perceived him, as the leader of the church and the leader of the nation. On the 40th anniversary of his death, homage was paid to the primate in front of his sarcophagus in the Archcathedral of St. John the Baptist in Warsaw, and the exhibition Unknown Photographs from the Farewell of Primate Wyszyński was opened at Krakowskie Przedmieście. He was a man who sought understanding, but he was a man who at the same time in this search for understanding stood on the side of truth. He was a man who could also say very strongly and specifically, non possumus. He paid a very high price for it, nearly 3 years in prison. The beatification of the servant of God is imminent, which will take place on the 12th of September in Warsaw. Prayers were held during the evening Mass at the Archcathedral of Warsaw for the beatification to bear good fruit.
Although Veterans Day is celebrated tomorrow, today celebrations were held in Krakow with the participation of President Andrzej Duda. The Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces awarded the Orders of the Military Cross to 2 soldiers from the Special Forces.
Order of the Military Cross, equivalent to the Virtuti Militari. These 2 commandos from Lubliniec received it for rescuing a wounded Afghan anti-terrorist officer from gunfire a year ago. They completed the task and came back even though it was extremely difficult. Difficult tasks, an inseparable part of missions abroad in which we have participated for nearly 70 years. There are a total of 27,000 veterans in Poland. They have served under the aegis of the European Union, the North Atlantic Alliance and the United Nations in the most diverse corners of the globe. Everywhere I go in the world where Polish soldiers have served or are serving, I hear words of gratitude, I hear words of appreciation. The 16th Airborne Battalion in Krakow was also one of the last points on the map of the 2nd Veterans Motorcycle Rally. We visited the graves of our colleagues, friends who were fathers, husbands. More than once a tear was shed. In total, 127 Poles died on missions abroad, mostly soldiers. Hundreds were wounded. I miraculously escaped with my life. Among others, Master Sergeant Janusz Raczy, who was on a mission in Iraq in 2004, was severely injured. One of the many vehicles that passed our checkpoint where we checked on pilgrims heading to Karbala failed to submit to inspection. Not all wounds are visible to the naked eye. Though sitting deeper in the mind, this is where the Warrior Project tries to help. We invite martial arts champions who practice once a month with veterans, exactly injured veterans, but also with the families of fallen soldiers so that they can socialize but also fight against those ailments of theirs. Veterans of foreign missions are also then Polish Hawks. He participated in Operation Inherent Resolve in Kuwait, flying over the skies of Iraq and Syria, and very often keeps combat duty as part of Baltic air policing in the Baltic states. The F-16s with their red and white checkerboards have just crossed the 100,000-hour mark in the skies.
As the European Union defines the scope of economic sanctions against the Belarusian regime, the ban on Belarusian airplanes flying over the EU has become a fact. Meanwhile, Alexander Lukashenko met with Vladimir Putin earlier today in Sochi.
Protests in front of the Belarusian embassy in Vilnius. On the border with Belarus, in Poland and in many places around the world. Thanks to them, Belarusians know that they are not alone with Lukashenko, and Putin leaning out from behind him. There is this suspicion that what happened with the Ryanair plane is the work of the Russians, in the sense that they are the ones who let Lukashenko up the garden path. The democratic world speaks with one voice about the kidnapping of Roman Pratasevich.
This is an absolutely unjustified action by the Belarusian regime, and there is no excuse for behaving in that way.
Yesterday, the parents of Roman Pratasevich, who was kidnapped by the Belarusian regime, appealed to EU countries and the United States. I'm screaming, save Raman! The deputy head of the Polish Ministry of Foreign Affairs met with them today. They can count on the support of the Polish diplomacy, and we also talked about the mutual knowledge we have about his status, his condition today. The European Union, in addition to banning Belarusian airlines from flying through EU airspace, freezing a €3 billion economic plan for Belarus and wants to hit the Belarusian economy with sanctions. This is a very good idea, says the leader of the Belarusian opposition, but under one condition. You have to strike very precisely so that small and medium-sized businesses are not harmed, so that as few outsiders as possible are affected, but so that the regime is severely affected. The regime is not officially suffering yet, but is moving even further east. I think we're going to come to an agreement with the Russian president because we encountered misfortune. During a meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Sochi, Lukashenko accused the West of trying to destabilize the situation in Belarus. It's an attempt to rock the boat and reach the level of August last year. It is clear what these Western friends want from us. There is nothing to talk about. In turn, the Russian leader promised him support in his dispute with the European Union, and he described its reactions as an emotional outburst.
And now for a knife attack on a female police officer in the west of France near Nantes. The attacker seriously injured the officer at a police station. The man then fled the scene, and after several hours of searching, the man was killed in a shootout with police.
During the manhunt, there was a shootout in which 2 gendarmes were wounded, as well as the attacker himself. The head of the French Interior Ministry went to the scene. Many French politicians expressed their support for the wounded officer, stressing that this is another attack on law enforcement in recent weeks. The motive of the attack is not known. French police said that the attacker was previously in prison for 8 years, where he became radicalized. More than 100 years after the crimes committed by German colonizers in what is now Namibia, the federal government has recognized them as genocide. It announced that over the next 30 years it would allocate more than 1 billion euros to help the descendants of the victims. In the early 20th century, German settlers killed more than 70,000 people in mass killings of local ethnic groups. For the 8th day, container ship carrying chemicals including 25 tons of nitric acid and over 300 tons of fuel is burning near the port of Colombo in Sri Lanka. The fire is being extinguished by Europe's firefighters and experts. The authorities fear that the vessel may crack at any time, resulting in the leak of hundreds of tons of fuel and an ecological disaster.
Polish volleyball players began the competition in the Men's Nations League with a victory. The White and Reds won in Rimini 3-0 against the hosts of the tournament, Italy.
A show of great strength of the Polish national team right at the beginning of the tournament. Our volleyball players at the inauguration of the League of Nations did not give a chance to the current Olympic vice-champions Italy. They won without the biggest stars in the lineup in 3 sets, never losing more than 20 points in any of them. Vital Heinen's players, as befits the current world champions, are of course one of the favorites of the 3rd edition of the League of Nations. We set this tournament as an important goal because it is the last and altogether the only test before the upcoming Olympic Games. In Rimini, Italy, the Poles are defending the bronze medals won in 2019 in Chicago.
2 French women are going to cross the American continent, actually both American continents, north and south. They chose a 65-year-old Citroën as their primary means of transportation, and they'll have 40,000 kilometers to cover.
Fanny Adam and Gabe Poyart are not afraid of neither challenges nor dangers. After all, this will be their adventure of a lifetime. They prepared the journey meticulously using the latest technology, but they have chosen an old car. As they explain, only a car with a soul can go on such a journey, and Citroën 15 CV certainly has it. The French ladies will set off in June from Prudhoe Bay in northern Alaska. They want to reach the city of Ushuaia on the southern edge of Argentina in January 2023. Bon voyage! The legacy of British astrophysicist Stephen Hawking will be divided between 2 esteemed institutions, the University of Cambridge and the Science Museum in London. This division was agreed to by the scientist's family. They want his work to be accessible to the public and his work to benefit a wide range of people. Stephen Hawking died 3 years ago. He was 76 years old. Ferenc Matic from the village of Tamasi in southern Hungary has been a fan of the swallows since childhood. Having watched their population decrease over the years, he decided to save the birds from extinction. In his own farmyard, he built 400 nests in which swallows can always find shelter. At one time, all the nests were filled. Last year, 250 were occupied. This summer, there may be even fewer visitors. They've come out of hiding after 17 years, so there's an opportunity to take a closer look, like Arlington photographer Oksana Ware. The artist decided to take advantage of the overwhelming presence of cicadees this year. The cicadees take a long time for their larvae to mature underground. And when they come to the surface, there are billions of them. The photographer insisted on keeping them in a frame because their earthly life is short.
And finally, we invite you to watch a unique documentary about Poles who sacrificed everything for others. The movie is entitled Of Animals and Men and will be screened starting on the 22nd of June in select movie theaters.
In the summer of 1939, the zoo looked really impressive.
We're at war. Everyone wanted to kill us. There were skeletons lying in the streets, and it was a terrible sight.
Literature often describes the expression in people's eyes. Angry, kind, pretty, ugly, happy, devastated. But if you've looked into the eyes of a mother facing death, you know you won't describe or ever forget such eyes.
Not everyone was willing to put their families in danger to save Jews.
Our house was always a refuge for the weak, for those in need.
Whenever we heard footsteps down the stairs, we were horribly terrified. We met nobody. We didn't even know other people were hiding there. I even told my mother, "Mom, this is where we'll live."
Our house was called Noah's Ark.
And with that, we conclude the program. Thank you for watching, everybody. We'll be back at the same time, same place tomorrow. See you then. Good night.